The following video has got all the information you need to know going into Game Week 5. Right then, I'm going to start this video as I do with all the other ones in this series. We're going to look at the top players for expected points by position. Obviously starting off with the goalkeepers, as you can see here. Vicario and Leno are the top two keepers, and I think realistically, the Draft Hound algorithms are looking at the quality of the opposition that these goalkeepers are facing. Vicario and Leno obviously playing the two, in my opinion, and probably the algorithm's opinions, weakest teams in the league in Sheffield United and Luton, both with very similar expected points in 1 and 2. Alisson, Martinez, Ederson, Ramsdale, Pope, Sanchez, Turner and Onana round off the goalkeepers. A player that, well, I certainly hadn't heard of, and I imagine you hadn't too. Destiny Udogie tops the list for defenders for expected points in Game Week 5 by a long margin as well. 6.4 expected points, which is almost one more than any other player in the defence position. Similarly with the goalkeepers, really, I think he's pitted up against one of the weakest teams in the league, and he's had an absolutely exceptional start to the season in terms of points, and his expected assists and expected goals sit quite highly amongst defenders, so I think rightfully so is expected to do really well against Sheffield United. Trent, Chilwell, Pedro Porro, Romero, Gusto, Van de Ven, Trippier and Disasi round out the top defenders. Interesting really, all four Tottenham defenders that are likely to play are amongst these top players, mixed in of course with the tried and trusted good defenders that we know this season in Trent and Chilwell. Gusto, is he going to play? I think that's a bit of a question to ask, really. I think Reece James he's coming back from injury. Whether he'll be fit for the Bournemouth game, I don't know. Probably one more game maximum for Gusto, and then Reece James is straight back in the team. So, yeah, I'd be hesitant as to whether I'd actually want to start Gusto this week, just with the threat of Reece James coming back from injury. Another player I wanted to talk about quickly is Kieran Trippier. Now, I think going forwards, he's going to be one of the best defenders in the game. He's already 30% owned amongst the game, but I don't mean this in a derogatory way by any means, but I think a lot of the inexperienced FPL players just looked at the top scoring players last season and went for him because, well, he was the top scoring defender, not looking at the fixtures he had to open up. And the fact his price was really, really high for, you know, what he was. I think that going forwards, Newcastle's fixtures really change, and they've got 7 or 8 fixtures where they could quite likely keep a clean sheet. And I think 6.5 million could become a much more palatable price tag for him, and he probably will become one of the best defenders in the game again. It's just, unfortunately, Newcastle have got off to a really tough start. He's the one player I wanted to talk about. I think he could come on now and score some points. Midfielders up next, and Son and Maddison are both higher than Salah for expected points. Now, if you've watched these series of videos for the rest of the season, basically the last couple of videos that I've made, Salah has by far been the strongest midfielder for expected points, but considering how well Spurs have started and the quality of opposition they're facing, doesn't really faze me that they're the top two. I'd probably largely agree with this. Son, 8.3 expected points, slightly higher than Maddison in second, obviously Salah in third. Saka, Sterling, Odegaard, Foden, Rashford, Martinelli and Luis Diaz round off the midfielders. The question is Son worth bringing into your team this week? I'm going to talk about him in a bit more detail in the video, but I think it's a bit of a luxury move if you're already sat on someone like Rashford. Now, I know the expected points are quite different really, 8.3 to 5.3 of Rashford, but my gut tells me that come the end of the season, they'll be on very similar points, and moving someone like Rashford off for Son is a bit of a luxury move, whereas if you're on your wild card, I don't mind bringing in Son in that occasion, and certainly if you've got a midfielder in your team that you really want to get rid of and you're just not happy with, maybe that falls, you know, Rashford falls into that category. I personally back Rashford to do well, but if you're really not happy with him, then maybe you could make that move. No surprise for who tops the list for the forwards in Erling Haaland. Alvarez looks to be getting some really good minutes for Man City at the moment, and this week is the second best forward for expected points. One thing to say about Man City though is their opponents, West Ham, they're a tricky team to figure out. They tend to show up in the games against really, really strong opposition and struggle in the games where, you know, their sit-back counter-attack style sort of goes head-to-head with the other team really, and they have to keep possession and intricately play through them and try and score. They play well against the good teams, and I think they can give Man City a tough game. The thing is, though, if you don't have Heung-min Son, Erling Haaland's still probably the best captain, right? Broke the Premier League record for goals last season. There's no reason to suggest that he can't score against West Ham away as well. Julian Alvarez, as I said, his minutes have rocketed up from last season. I think obviously the injury to De Bruyne and Mahrez leaving the club as well, allowing Foden to play in Mahrez's role, opens up a spot for Alvarez. He's been fantastic in that position so far, and I don't really see a reason that Pep Guardiola drops him, certainly with no European football to contend with so far. Isak, Darwin Núñez, Nicholas Jackson, he's been a bit disappointing. I've now got him in my team myself. Yeah, not too happy with how he's been doing, unfortunately. Watkins, Awoniyi, who I'm going to do a little feature on next, Ferguson, Solanke, and Gabriel Jesus round out the forwards. So the all-important question then of captaincy. So we've looked at all the players by position now, and these are the top 6. Son leads the way for expected points by 0.1 expected points over Haaland. So the captaincy, if you base it on expected points alone, Son tops the list. I would say if you have both Haaland and Son, you should probably captain Son. I think, you'll get the points as a baseline that Haaland gets, and anything Son gets you is an absolute bonus, really. And considering his expected points are so high and the opponent is so weak, I think he could well outscore Haaland this week. However, if you have Haaland and don't have Son, I wouldn't be too scared. I think you'll be all right. Captaining Haaland, isn't always a safe option, right? Broke the Premier League goal scoring record last season. There's no reason to say he won't be able to nick a couple of goals against West Ham. So I think he's a perfectly valid backup. The real question is the more popular James Maddison. Could he compete with Haaland on captaincy? Obviously, the expected points for Maddison are lower for Haaland, but you all know how good Maddison has been this season. And, this is numbers and algorithms and maths, etc. That's one part of the parcel for me with FPL, but there's also how they've been playing on the pitch. And Maddison has looked far more influential, in my opinion, than Son has. It's only really Richarlison not playing in the number 9 spot. Son moving into that position that he managed to nick a hat-trick in game week 4. So I think Maddison, Son and Haaland are definitely viable captains. Personally, I'm going to go for the tried and trusted Erling Haaland. There's a case to be made for Son, certainly if you own him, as well as Haaland, as well as Maddison. Although, personally, I think those two options are quite risky. But if you have Son, I think you might as well do it this week. Quick look then at the top teams for clean sheet odds. Tottenham top the list. They're the only team above, or 50% or above, more likely than not. They're evens basically to keep a clean sheet against Sheffield United. Fulham 44% against Luton. Newcastle, as I said, I'm starting to back them a little bit defensively. And one of the players that I'm going to really look at in detail to buy this week is a Newcastle player, so stay tuned for that. They're 42% to keep a clean sheet against Brentford. We've got Arsenal and Liverpool above 40%, above 30. Man City also on 40, Aston Villa, Chelsea and Forest above 30. The reason I reiterate the 30% point, it's my personal marker really, laying a line in the sand for teams that I'd be comfortable starting their defenders from. Any team sort of below 30% this week, I'd try and bench them if at all possible. All right, then the first player we're going to look at in terms of bringing in is Heung-min Son. Now, last season we all know that he played with a hernia, and comparing his stats last season to 21-22, the last season he was fully fit. It was night and day, basically. Won the Golden Boot in 21-22, 23 goals, 7 assists, 0.7 expected returns per 90. This season so far, started 4 games, scored 3.64 expected returns per 90. So he's finally back to full fitness, and his numbers are very similar per 90 minutes at least to what he was pulling up in the season he won the Golden Boot. He's clearly performing better in the number 9 position as well. I think he's going to keep playing that position. That's one of the main points I'm making, basically. I think Son's only pickable as he plays in the number 9 position. The reason he hasn't done well in the first 3 games of the season is Postecoglou likes to play his left winger quite wide. And obviously, Son, he's an elite finisher and he needs to be cutting inside, which doesn't necessarily suit the Postecoglou system. When he's playing number 9, though, which Richarlison is allowing him to do by being pretty poor, to be honest, both for Brazil and Tottenham so far this season, Son looks like he's absolutely flying. And got to think he's the penalty taker in Kane's absence. So for me, if you're looking for a player to bring into your team this week in the midfield, you've got one option you're not too happy with. I think Son's your man. Next up then, he might have Newcastle away, which is obviously a tough fixture, but I think Brian Mbeumo is just an absolutely stellar option this season. He's number 1 in the league for expected goal involvement. He's my pick of the cheaper midfielders, just for the fact he's nailed to start every game, plays pretty much 90 minutes every game. He's on the penalties, looks like he's even improved on how he did last season. 4 goals in 4 games already, a great set of upcoming fixtures. You don't have to worry about his minutes. He's on the penalties, so many routes to points. He's a cracking option. Okay, Awoniyi is my next player. I'm mentioning him in every video I make at the moment because I think he's absolutely fantastic. I just can't find the room for him in my team. It's really quite annoying to be honest, but I always have a priority transfer that's above bringing a Awoniyi in. But I really do think he's a fantastic option. His form last season was great. He's got 8 goals in his last 8 Premier League appearances, basically, and only made 4 this season. So he's carrying on the form from last season. His ownership's only 4.4%. So he's a great differential. They've got a great set of fixtures coming up, bar obviously Man City away in game week 6. However, he scored at both the Emirates and Old Trafford and got an assist at Stamford Bridge. Like, I don't think you can prove your fixture proof. I put that in inverted commas because you just never know. It's Man City away, right? The toughest fixture you can ask for. But he's as fixture proof as they come from these sorts of teams, in my opinion. And I think he's a great option. Finally, then, I'm going to talk about Nick Pope. Now, I personally think there's a real shortage of good goalkeeping options at the moment. Onana, who's my keeper in my team at the moment, cost me 5 million. Barely keeping a clean sheet or getting any saves bonus. Obviously, Nick Pope has not had a great start to the season. Newcastle in general have not had a great start to the season, but they've had really, really tough fixtures, and they start to change now game week 5 onwards. Brentford at home first up, Sheffield United, Burnley, West Ham and Palace. Good fixtures, and I think you can't rule out Newcastle defence. They were so good last season, and I think the fact they've had some really tough fixtures, Botman has been injured, has really not helped them in terms of conceding goals. And if he can refine the form that he was at last season, 14 clean sheets from 37 starts, a good amount of saves per game as well. I know he's 5.5 million. It's very expensive for a defender, don't get me wrong. But he makes saves and gets clean sheets, which, Alisson might make saves bonus, but not necessarily keeping the clean sheets. Edison, clean sheets is all you're getting, whereas Pope, I think, gives you the best of both worlds. And I think over the next 6 weeks will prove to be the highest scoring goalkeeper. So if you've got a bit of cash in the bank, looking to change your goalkeeper, Nick Pope is your man. Alright, and that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave me a like rating and subscribe to the Golden Goal channel, which should be just here, and I'll catch you in the next one.